Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Talmy, and my talk today is called The Living Museum, How AI Can Transform the Museum Experience. Who am I? I'm a software engineer by training, and I currently am building AI applications. I have previously worked at large LLM companies and large tech companies, including small startups, usually focused on the data side. Today's talk is going to have three main sections. So first, I'll talk about what the Living Museum is, essentially like sort of a mini viral app that I released that sort of caught the attention of the museum world. Second, I'm going to talk about the popular reception, what were some of the positive feedback, negative feedback, what were some of my learnings. Finally, I'll talk about future work, so where I think this space is going and what we can learn from this experience and others about how AI can change the experience of going to a museum. So let's talk about the Living Museum first. And this really starts with a bookmark. I had found out about the British Museum's online collection. For those of you who don't know, a lot of their collection is online. And I had bookmarked this specific artifact, which is an ancient Egyptian ostracon, where people would write their reasons for missing work. And I thought it was really interesting and kind of amusing to see the kind of reasons that people would be able to miss work. Some of those reasons would not actually fly today, which is quite something. And but more realistically, I thought that this collection, the digitization of this collection, was a really amazing achievement. The museum's collection has 8 million objects. There were 2 million or over 2 million in the digital collection. And so being able to explore all of this through some interface was I thought really incredible. And I would often return to it, from time to time and just sort of play around and look things up. Now, the collection has two main parts. First, I'll talk about search. You basically are able to search across metadata classifications and look at the hierarchy of metadata. So behind the scenes with the British Museum's collection, there's really an amazing and rich knowledge graph, a hierarchical knowledge graph. And so you're able to search across these metadata classification pieces, as well as use keywords, which kind of works, but also doesn't work so well. So I show an example here where if you search for weapons medieval Japan, you get 0 results, although we know for sure that there are artifacts that should appear in the British Museum's collection. And if you, on the right, if you look at sort of my app, because I use a different search method, you would actually end up seeing some results here. When you find an artifact you like, you can click into it and you are presented with a list of metadata. Typically not with a ton of context. It really depends on the specific artifact itself. You don't have many opportunities for further discovery and exploration. You can look at this artifact, but it's not clear what are things related to it. If there's something in the description that you don't know about, there's no clear way for you to learn more about it. It's kind of just this sort of static metadata list. But the images themselves are extremely captivating. Oftentimes, artifacts will have many of them, and they really add a lot to the experience. So I stumbled upon this again sometime last year, and I was just asking myself, with all these advances in AI, are there any things that we can do to improve this experience, given the fact that it is such an amazing and unique collection? So the first thing I thought about was search. How can I improve the search experience? And I thought that it would be great if people could search using natural language. So as an example, if someone wanted to look into jewelry worn by Egyptian pharaohs or masks used in Aztec rituals or anything they could really imagine, it would be great if this could trigger a search that returned relevant artifacts. And I also would want people to be able to search in different ways. So searching across time, if you're interested in, let's say, how swords have evolved from time period to time period, or if you wanted to double click within a specific time period. For example, if you wanted to learn more about like the Edo period in Japan, you should be able to do both of these things. Then when it came to the artifacts themselves, I saw a really clear opportunity to bring them to life with large language models. So large language models have immense world knowledge. They've been trained on pretty much all of all of human knowledge and everything that we've written on the internet. And this means that they are able to let people explore their curiosity in a sort of unbounded fashion. They can ask lots of different questions, go deeper into a subject, pivot to a different one. And this enables like a type of personalized learning. So, the models can talk to you if you're a novice or if you're an expert, and it's really personalized to your specific knowledge and skill level. So this is essentially what I did. I built like a AI-powered modern interface for the BM's online collection, and it really has two main features. The first is you can create these micro exhibits using natural language. So searching things like on the previous slide would yield like a beautiful mosaic of different artifacts that you could then explore. And then when you find an artifact you want to talk to, you can enter into a conversation with it and learn more about it that way, as well as learn about other things from that time period. So I'll just show you a little bit of how this works in person. The first element is the search, as I said, and this is an example of one of my favorite searches, Japanese prints, and you're presented with this beautiful grid of all these like colorful prints, woodblock prints from Japan, and it really is quite stunning when you see this, and you can navigate 360 degrees. And as an example of how you might, how a curator might sort of be interested in constructing an exhibit that goes across time, I show you this example of a search query for cats, where you see there's quite a lot of different types of artifacts from different time periods. You have statues from antiquity, you have prints, you have modern art, and you really get a whole range here. To show you a little bit how the chat works, if you open up an artifact and you start speaking to it, you can basically ask it about anything from that time period, anything about the specifics of that artifact itself. You're prompted with further questions that you can ask, and all of this is being driven off of the British Museum's data that they've collected and curated. So I want to talk now about the popular reception and the different sort of critiques that I received after launching this. So I guess this kind of went viral in as much of a way that one can go viral in the sort of museum world. But after I launched it, I got hundreds of thousands of requests and thousands of unique users. In 1 week, I processed 50 million tokens, and there was a large social media reaction as well, which I wasn't really expecting. I've had interview requests, conference invitations. It's kind of, I still get emails about it every week with people wanting to collaborate or learn more or things like that. Now, starting with the positive, there was a lot of positive reaction. So many people found it really engaging and informative. I saw in the data that many conversations went on for hundreds of messages. And there were people who really got a lot out of it from that conversational interface, and also being able to converse in their own native language. So in one case, I saw a user speaking in Catalan for 100 messages with a random artifact. And a lot of museums reached out to me personally because they saw these sort of innovative user interfaces as ways to show off more of their collections, especially if they're smaller and they have limited floor space. This really helps them sort of expand their digital footprint in a unique way. Now, there was also quite a large negative reaction on social media, hundreds of critical posts on X, on Reddit, on LinkedIn, etc., from what I've seen. And I think the best way for me to cover this is just to give a summary that was produced by Google Gemini. So I'll just read this out verbatim. The social media reaction to the Living Museum app is overwhelmingly negative to cautiously critical, particularly amongst museum professionals and those concerned with ethical and cultural heritage issues. While some acknowledge the technical achievement and potential for engagement, the dominant themes revolve around concerns about authenticity, ethical implications of AI interactions with cultural artifacts, especially those with contested histories, environmental impact, and the tone and approach of the AI itself. A smaller segment expresses curiosity and sees potential for learning and accessibility. So yeah, like quite an interesting response. I'm going to go over some of these critiques, which I've bucketed into 4 different categories. And then on the next slide, I'll talk about my personal response to some of these critiques. So the first main bucket was ethical concerns, colonialism, cultural sensitivity. This shouldn't be a surprise considering how I built this on top of the British Museum's data, and there was some controversy there about repatriation and things like that. So there was the discussion about cultural appropriation, colonial narratives, lack of indigenous voices, and sensitivity to sacred objects. Some of these were a complete surprise to me. I didn't, for example, know that reanimating sort of, mummies or dead objects or was controversial. Kind of makes sense in hindsight. The second major bucket was authenticity in the museum experience. There was a feeling in some cases that it undermined the curatorial expertise and sort of promoted a more shallow engagement with objects. And people couldn't form personal connections with history and culture in the same way they would without AI. I addressed this on the next slide. I'm not sure I fully agree with this, but I do think that there's it's important to preserve that human element, because that's something that really adds a lot to the experience. Tone and voice of the AI, I think the patronizing and simplistic tone, uniform voice for all artifacts, and both siding of controversial issues. In some cases, I agree. I think that the AI was a little bit too whimsical. I definitely agree with that feedback. In terms of the other critiques, I'll talk about that on the next slide. And finally, the environmental impact, concern about energy consumption of AI technologies. I'm not an expert here. I've seen some and read some reports, and I personally think that some of the concerns here are overblown. Certainly, I don't think AI at an inference stage is more energy intensive than sort of all the other apps and things that the internet apps that people use, but I'll let people do their own research here. So responding to the feedback, just a couple points here that I think are really important as people consider building their own sort of AI applications in the museum world. First, the important thing to keep in mind is that the tone, style, and content are very easily changeable. They're often changeable with just a few lines of code in the prompt that tells the model to behave in a certain way, and the models are going to be even more steerable in the future. So if you want your chatbot to have a specific sort of a response to concerns about colonialism or repatriation, you can very easily do that. That's not really a problem. And one of the key things that I think is lost on many people is that the conversations themselves relied on data and commentary from human curators and archivists. So the British Museum's data is incredible. It's super rich. Many artifacts even have like curator commentary in the metadata. And the conversations were driven by this human-generated and human-curated data. So they really like you without that sort of human effort, without that data, the app would not nearly be as impactful. And that's just something to really keep in mind, is that like this is building on the work of human curators rather than replacing it. And third, this is sort of my personal opinion, but I think that neutrality can open up space for user-led interpretation. I've read some stuff about like the constructivist museum where visitors build their own understanding and they make meaning of their own. Obviously, you don't want to go too far in that direction, but I do think that that's a really something to consider in the sense of when you have this sort of dynamic exchange with AI. And just this leads me to a question at the end of the day, how can we ensure that cultural institutions benefit from advanced technology without alienating the people working inside them? In a way, letting people letting knowledge be personalized to people, having people converse in their native language, being able to do this from anywhere in the world is amazing for democratizing the work of museums and human curators. But it also seems to alienate people within them. So let's try to reconcile that. How can we sort of make sure that people see the benefits and it doesn't sort of replace, but rather augments the work of human beings? So just a couple observations here. I from looking at the user data and sort of like talking to people, reading the feedback, I did notice that a lot of conversations stalled after 5 to 10 messages. The people would want to sort of continue in a different direction, but they didn't have a clear way to do that. They might ask for things like related artifacts or other things from that time period or something else entirely, but there wasn't a clear way to do that, and so it would be great if they had an opportunity to sort of pivot the conversation. A lot of times the model just didn't know the answer to a question. Everyone here knows the issue with hallucinations, and the models don't know everything. So it would be great if the model had some way of retrieving information about a specific problem. So an updated version should keep users engaged over a long period of time. So not just limited to scoped to an individual artifact, but being able to see things from to sort of go on a journey through a time period, but also have them sort of jump between different objects and time periods, something that would keep them engaged and keep the conversation flowing. And additionally, you would also supplement the conversations with external research. This could be an internal knowledge base or web search. There's many different ways to do this, but it would be great that it would be have a tool available to search things up when it doesn't know the answer. And it's important to note that no matter what, the curators still shape the experience. They can actually add a lot by defining sort of preset journeys or suggested artifacts, or even like translating the work they do in creating exhibits into sort of a digital space with this continuous flowing conversation. It's certainly possible, and I think there's a lot of interesting things that can be done there. So this leads me to a section on future work. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about how I think knowledge acquisition in general as a concept has evolved over the last couple decades. So, I think that the story here is really the evolution from static to dynamic knowledge acquisition and exploration. So starting with books, before the internet, these are just static knowledge repositories. Reading a book is not interactive, but it's a great way to learn things. Then when you get the internet, you have things like Wikipedia and Google search, and you start to see like a little bit more active knowledge acquisition, so interactivity. You have like the Wikipedia rabbit hole, which is essentially this non-linear branched traversal across the knowledge graph. You click into one thing, you click into another thing, you go back, you click into something else. The knowledge itself is static, but you're sort of exploring it dynamically. And then with language models and agents and what we see today with ChatGPT and things like that, you have even more of a dynamic knowledge exploration capability. The explanations are personalized to you, as we discussed before, and the knowledge is adapted to your skill level and your specific knowledge, like how much knowledge you already have. And this enables this amazing boundless exploration. You can talk to ChatGPT endlessly about any subject and just keep going and going and going. It's like a more supercharged version of Wikipedia. So how do we actually acquire knowledge in museums, and is it different? So I'd argue that knowledge in museums is mostly static. If you're walking around a museum, you look at you look at the labels, you read the labels. Maybe if you are lucky, you get an audio guide or a tour guide, and it's still mostly sort of a static, sort of unidirectional knowledge acquisition. And there's there's still there's still virtual exhibits and digital collections. But these are often not really as rich or dynamic as they could be. But we also know that museums are really great for multimodal learning. Like there's a lot of research that shows that when you learn from images, videos, like multimedia, you learn better and faster than you would with simply just text or just a single modality. And museums do this, natively, right? They have you're experiencing things, you're seeing things, you're visual, you're seeing. It's a very visual experience. You might even have some other modalities as well. So it's a great place for people to actually learn and acquire knowledge through multimodal interfaces. For the digital side, as you saw sort of with the British Museum's search interface, it's really just kind of lookup behavior rather than interactive exploration. You can look things up, you can read about it, but there's no real interactivity there. So what makes museums irreplaceable in my mind is that the artifacts themselves are still primary sources, right? They are basically, you know, the artifacts themselves possess some special characteristics with the way they look, feel, how you feel walking around them. Their sort of resonance that actually enhances the experience of learning from them. And then there's when you are talking about a museum itself, you have the collective experience of doing it with other people. There's like this social learning aspect where you talk to people about what you see, you walk with them, you bounce questions off of each other, and that's really an amazing way to learn and acquire knowledge in museums as well. So this presents us with a bunch of opportunities. I think AI is really good at encouraging active learning, but it doesn't have the grounding in these real objects that are authenticated and contextualized by human experts. That's still really important. And museums provide this rich multimodal educational experience, but they could be more interactive, right? There could be better ways of acquiring that knowledge and exploring that knowledge in museums as well as digitally. So can we use AI with its dialogue and personalization capabilities to build on the strengths of museums, which is the authentic objects, the expert curation, the multimodality? That's my question that I'm posing to all of you. And so potentially, one idea for how this could play out if you want to make museums more dynamic and interactive is something like an agentic museum guide, either on the digital website or in person. Something that you can ask questions back, you can talk to, and it can be adapted to your specific skill level, age, language, etc. So, in conclusion, museums connect us with real, tangible pieces of history. These are physical artifacts people created, used, and treasured, and that they possess special value, educational value, that are simply irreplaceable, in my opinion. And so if you try to augment the museum experience with AI to take that and turn it into this interactive, active learning exercise, I think that visitors will forge deeper personal connections with these objects. My living museum experiment was sort of an example of trying to see if people could learn better through these objects by talking to them versus sort of just reading about them. And I think that if you do this right, this builds on the curatorial expertise, doesn't replace it, right? No one's talking about building AI curators, at least not yet. We're talking about taking the work that they've done to collect this knowledge and contextualize it and making it easier for people to acquire it. And I think that this, if done right, is going to be a step change improvement over traditional chatbots and virtual museums. There's something special that you can't get when you're just talking to ChatGPT, and you can't get when you're just clicking around on a virtual museum or Wikipedia. There's something that must be better if it's true that these museums possess something that unique, that helps people acquire knowledge and learn in a much more engaging way. And so that is it for my talk. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks a lot, and happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really interesting to see someone being able to use this open data to build something completely different. Jonathan, do you want to join me on screen and take some questions? Hello, how are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Thanks very much for being here. Let's see what people are asking. The chat box seems to be going mad for this one. Incredible project. How much time did it take to develop? And that's from Christina.
I'd say there was a few different iterations, so over a few months in total. But this final version with the 2 core features was probably a few weeks of evenings and weekends.
Wow. So, yeah, huge amount done in that time. Another question, please. Have you considered applying the Living Museum model to other museums? The Rijksmuseum would be great. And that's from Rachel.
I think that any sort of AI-powered interface like the one I built would be able to slot well with any museum that has a great digital collection with lots of metadata for individual objects, because it's definitely a reproducible pattern. I personally haven't sort of pursued any further opportunities for this project at the moment. Not intending to commercialize it, but I do think that I've talked to a lot of museums, privately over email and done calls, and always happy to share knowledge and feedback and anything else I can do to help.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when museums opened up their collections, I think they were really hoping that there would be developers like yourself out there who just love doing this stuff and want to just make things with their collections. There's no commercial intent with it. It's just making something great, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Uh, Brilliant. Another question, please. What feedback did you get from the British Museum itself? And that's from Chloe.
I actually haven't spoken to them at all, and I also didn't really try to reach out. There was some concern about how the copyright for the images was properly displayed, and so they gave me, their legal department gave me some feedback on that, and I updated the site to make sure that that the right attribution was there. But so far, I haven't spoken to them about the project.
Cool. Well, the British Museum are attending this conference, so perhaps they can tell us in the chat box what they think.
I would love to.
Another question, please, Stephen. Do you know the average time someone spends with an object? And that's from Joseph.
Yeah, it tended to be, like, as I said before, around 4 to 5 messages, and there was a long tail of conversations that went on for 50, 100, even more. I think with a new way of structuring the conversational interface, where you're talking to an AI museum guide that pulls in relevant artifacts, would lead to longer engagement and longer sessions over time. And I think people would want that because it's a more continuous and sort of more continuous and better way to keep the journey of exploration going.
Yeah, completely. Let's see, another question, please. How did you mitigate hallucinations? That's from Phoebe.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think the model that you choose actually determines a lot of the hallucinations that you get. So I would notice that when I was using smaller models that were cheaper, like the one that's currently on the app right now, just to help me save money as it's online, that one, it leads to more hallucinations overall. But when you go to up to more expensive, larger models, then you have fewer hallucinations. Generally, I would say that the way to mitigate hallucinations is to have really good lookup and search, either for private knowledge repositories or web search. I know this sounds counterintuitive to people, but actually the top 10 blue links when you do a Google search are generally pretty accurate and reliable. And so when the model has the ability to look things up with a web search or something, then that's how you can prevent these types of hallucinations.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned, Jonathan, and I know from seeing it happen that this was kind of a viral sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were a lot of calls that the AI was making. Did it cost you lots of money, this going viral?
I mean, yeah, like maybe a couple $100 in the start, and then now the ongoing maintenance is like, I don't know, a couple, like $50 a month or something. But nothing. I mean, considering how it sort of took on a life of its own, I think it was totally worth it.
Yeah, just curious. Let's see, another question, please. What developments would you like to make to the Living Museum next? And that's from Marco. Is it finished, or is it something that you think you'll go back to?
I think it's not something that I actively develop, but I do like talking to museum professionals, and certainly, like, just following like the Ask Mona folks. I think there's people working on similar things that are much more sophisticated than what I built. But I think I really think that the agentic AI museum guide is a real interesting opportunity for museums that have digital collections, and one can imagine just like this sort of basically this endlessly flowing conversation, spanning time, space, all periods of history, with beautiful visuals on the side, is just something that I have sort of dreamed of making, but I'm not actively planning on working on that at this time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it will be happening. We've got a comment from Crystal. Such a cool project. Thanks for creating new things.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Another question, please. Did you make any changes to the model to address the social media feedback? And that's from Katja.
I don't think I've really touched. I don't think I've touched it that much since releasing it, other than maybe trying to tone down some of the whimsicality. I felt like it. I thought that part of feedback was really good. Generally, like the museums probably have like a specific voice that they want to communicate with the public with, and they obviously have, like, for certain controversial issues, they have responses and the way that they want to handle that. And I think that's really easy to bake into these systems, much easier than one would expect. So I want to leave this project there as just an experiment on the modality, and like like how you might converse with AI, how these systems might be set up. The specific way that the model currently in my app is responding to certain questions, to me, is like less important than, do people want to learn this way, or is it engaging for people? And then you can sort of hash out those details later.
Fantastic. I think we've got time for one last question. What do we have in the hat, please, Stephen? Are you able to tell which audiences are mostly engaging with the AI, or who you're reaching? Is it young people, or people who already have historical knowledge? And that's from Claire.
Actually, yeah. So there was a really broad distribution of people who engaged with it. Even just looking at the logs, I would see like quite young people, like kids using it, and I had some teachers reach out to me talking about how they had their kids in their classes, like playing with it, asking questions. Some people wrote, introduced it into their educational programs and things like that. So, and then of course I saw like some, actually very like educated, knowledgeable experts who are trying to test the model's knowledge and see how well it could answer certain questions. So I saw a broad variance. Had I actually tried to turn this into a real product and marketed it, who knows what the real audience would have settled in. But I did receive positive feedback that for kids and for students, it was helpful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. I think it's a project that others in the museum tech world are going to build upon and learn from the feedback that you got from doing this project just for the hell of it. So thank you so much for doing that.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.